Hello! I'll keep this very short. As many of you know already, I recently released a class on storytelling, which is one of the things in all of life that I am most passionate about. I think storytelling is deeply intertwined with what it means to be human, how we make sense of the world, how we make sense of ourselves. I'm really proud of how this class came out. It was months of work and effort. The reaction has been very, very positive thus far, so thank you to all of you that have checked it out. And if you're curious and not quite sold just yet, I thought I would share with you first the trailer for the class and then a free lesson from the class in this video. If you're interested, I'll leave a link to it down below. If not, all good, enjoy the free lesson. I just want to quickly mention the pricing of the class because I know there will be comments and questions about that. I obviously tried to share as much as I possibly can for free to the world. And the vast majority of what I do is available for free here on YouTube. I chose to charge for this class because AdSense is not great and I don't like having a full dependence on sponsors, for example. A degree in filmmaking costs tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in many institutions of higher education in the United States and elsewhere in the world. I'm not suggesting that this is a replacement for a film degree, but I am sharing everything that I know in how I've been able to build a career essentially with visual storytelling. And I'm combining forces with Johnny, who is also sharing his insights and what he's learned over the many years that he's been doing it. I recognize that this is a big chunk of change, but we've packed this with as much value as we possibly can. There's also a scholarship program that you can apply to where you can kind of make the case for a discounted rate for the class, especially if you come from a country where the average income would make a purchase like this very difficult, which we're totally understanding of. Obviously, I want as many people as possible to take this class because I really believe in what I made. So I shouldn't even be saying this, but we make an effort to work with people to see what's possible. So anyway, having said that, enjoy this trailer and free lesson from the class.
Stories are incredibly powerful, and yet the art and craft of storytelling is not very well understood.
My name is Nathaniel Drew.
And I'm Johnny Harris.
And we've developed this course to share everything that we've learned from our combined experiences traveling and telling the stories of those travels.
Story is kind of an enigma. Everybody knows that good storytelling is important. Most people don't know how to craft a really good story. We have all these prescriptive formulas, like the traditional 3-act structure. Those might help some people, but they never helped me. And they certainly haven't helped me tell better visual stories about my travels or about issues around the world. It turns out there are many ways to go about telling a good story, and that's why we made this class.
In this course, we deconstruct the concept of story and share what it means to us. The two of us have different voices and styles that we've developed over the years, from the formulaic to the impromptu. And we're each going to share our own perspectives on how we think about storytelling in a non-linear fashion.
We'll take you through the entirety of the story-making process, from ideation all the way through post-production. We'll share how we use our curiosity to drive our story selection, and how each of us use different formulas and ingredients and ideas to develop our stories throughout the process.
This course is focused on travel storytelling, so we're going to share our insights on how to capture your experiences when you're out in the field. And we'll guide you on how to get those key shots to really elevate your narrative.
This class is packed with hours of our best perspective and teaching we can offer. And by the end of it, you will be armed with knowledge and practical skills that will help you be a better storyteller. We're not going to gloss over the fact that this will take time, that these are skills to develop, but we want to teach you everything we know so that you can develop your own unique voice and style.
Whether you're a beginner or an expert, there's always more to learn about storytelling perspectives and techniques. In this course, we're here to help you along your journey in developing your abilities to tell the stories of your travels and have a greater impact on your audience.
So join us as we dive into the art and craft of visual storytelling.
We're really excited to take you on this journey, so see you there.
Now listen, this is not a shooting fundamentals course. Like, we're not going into all of the on-the-ground tips that we could talk about. We're focusing on story. That is the purpose of this course. But in this lesson, I do want to give you a few tips on capturing a place and getting the right shots so that you can construct a compelling story later in the edit. As we talked about in the last lesson, visual evidence is the lifeblood of a good visual travel story. That visual evidence will vary depending on what you're trying to show and say. But one of the best and most common genres of visual evidence that every travel story will have is the establishing shot. Establishing footage. After all, the place, the city, the country, wherever, that's the stage upon which the story is set. Thus, it is very important that you refine your ability to capture the establishing shot. Remember at the beginning when I said that there's a lot of gravity pulling on your story to make it not be good? To make your viewer not understand, for the story to not be clear and compelling? Well, I would argue that the same sort of force applies to establishing a place. It doesn't happen by default. It's not like by just capturing a bunch of footage and putting the camera around, you feel like you're in the place. I mean, remember my old footage from 2012 of New York City? You don't feel like you're in New York City. You sort of feel like this is a disjointed set of just clips of a guy who's just learning how to run a camera, which is exactly what it was. In order to actually bring your viewer to a place, you have to intentionally capture a certain type of shot. It requires a deep sense of intention and discipline to get just a few important shots to help bring someone to where you are, so that they can feel grounded in this place, so that everything that happens after feels like a story with a stage. We saw this a lot with Iz's vlogs earlier, when she established Belgium. All those beautiful drone shots, those shots of the street performers and the people walking on the street, that brings you to that place. And she did that at the beginning very intentionally, so that the rest of the story, the rest of our trip, took place in that environment, on that stage. Doing this is honestly half the work of telling a good travel story. Once you've established a solid sense of place, you've really built a stage that you can tell whatever story you want to. So let's talk about some tips for getting really good establishing footage. Number one, be steady. Be steady, please be steady. It took me so long to actually learn this. Be steady. If you don't have a tripod, put your camera on a bench and hit record and let it sit. And my rule of thumb here, I really do this now, is I let go of the camera for at least 5 seconds. Literally, physically, I step away. Because I'm such a compulsive shooter that I just want to have the camera with me and I'm like, oh, that was steady enough and I'll move on. What I try to do is I literally put it down somewhere, either on the tripod or on a bench or on a whatever ledge. And then I press record and I literally put my hands like this to say like, I am getting establishing footage. I will thank myself later. And then after the little thing says 5 seconds, I press stop. I know this sounds dramatic, but I literally have to physically restrain myself because this footage is so important. A small tripod is a great investment for this. We'll put some down in the product guide below, but regardless of how you stabilize your camera, just find a way. The important thing is that it's steady, and steady footage is a vital ingredient to establishing a sense of place. The next big tip is go wide. The first thing people want to do when they start making their travel film is they want to get really zoomed in shots. They have some fancy zoom lens. They want to zoom in and get the detail of the castle and the detail of the cobblestone streets and the detail of the houses in the place they're in. When we do this, we see a bunch of close-up footage and we don't really know where we are. Instead, we just have a bunch of details. What we need is wide shots. Humans don't see the world like this. They see the world like this and this. Your travel story should have a few of these shots in every location you visit. Make sure you get them. So if you combine steps 1 and 2, what you're going to get is a stable, wide shot, which is like the quintessential establishing shot. They are vital. Luckily, a drone is a really amazing way to get this because a drone is inherently stable. It's stabilized by a gimbal. And then it's inherently wide. You're high up, you're wide. So we use drone shots a lot as establishing footage. But be disciplined and get those shots also when you're on the ground. Set up your camera, get it wide, and get those shots. Once you've established the place with steady wide shots, you've now earned the right to highlight the details that you want to highlight, which are the close-up shots. Every place has unique details, and you don't really get to see them when you're super wide. the architecture or the texture of the streets or the shops, the people. Using your camera, you can decide what details you want your viewer to pay attention to. Once you've set the stage, zoom in and look for interesting details. The other thing I really love about a place is human experiences. The street performers or the people walking on the street, that's human experience. That brings your viewer to a culture of human beings living in a street as opposed to just brick and cobblestone streets. So, those are my rules of thumb. Wide, steady shots, close-up details, and human shots. These are the vital ingredients to establishing place, and they require you to slow down and be intentional. The beautiful thing about this, though, is that when you have those shots in mind, when like those are your marching orders, wide, close-up, and human, you only have to get a few of those shots and then you can move on. You don't have to spend the entire time just with your camera on. You get those shots, you put your camera away, you've captured a little scene. But then, of course, I've talked a lot about forward motion. If there's action shots, driving in the taxi, on the ferry, walking to the new place, you want to capture those action shots. That is what helps bring your story forward, to show what happens next, to give forward motion. So these are my ingredients. When I'm on the ground, this is what I'm thinking about. This is the raw material that later I can use to construct a powerful travel story in the edit.
So here are some of my thoughts on capturing place and bringing your audience into a particular place. First of all, I think it's really important to think in levels. Now, this can apply to your shots, close-in shots for details, medium shots, so that you can kind of be on the same level as the person, and wide shots for establishing and for context. All three of these levels of shots complement each other and add kind of visual variety. And they're all present in my video on learning languages. In that video, we have wide-angle shots, oftentimes drone shots, for establishing where we are in the world and what is happening, right? We're seeing the car driving through the countryside, and you can see that there's nobody else there, which is really cool. There's the medium shots with both me and Greg, and you're kind of in the car there with both of us and kind of able to have context about like how we're interacting. And then there's detail shots of the wheel or of my eyes or of a particular bit of texture, you know, and that those moments are kind of helpful to see sort of the richness of the environment and to really zoom in a little bit. Obviously, it's not always possible to have all three of these levels, but whenever you can, I think it can really be helpful to establish the full range of what an environment can provide as these different levels kind of help each other, they support each other. The same is true with pacing. I think of pacing in terms of levels. So an intro oftentimes will move more quickly, you're hooking people in, you're building excitement, there's movement, there's quick cutting, you know, lots going on, right? But you can't necessarily stay at that pace for a very long, sustained amount of time. So when I'm establishing an environment, once we're kind of in the body of the video, I really like to take my time and I think about how I can bring somebody into a particular moment. Is it a slow motion shot of a park or a very symmetrical shot of a building, or it might be a drone shot, right? But that I stick with for a fairly long moment of time as you hear voiceover or some other audio that slowly kind of pulls you further into the story. Once you're kind of in the meat of the video, revel in it. Another thing that I really place a huge emphasis on is how I feel. Help people be there with you. You are a big piece of that. It's important to remember that you are the bridge between that place or that experience or that thing that you're doing and the audience. Without you, this whole exchange isn't happening.
I was feeling a little bit frustrated because I had all these things that I wanted to do here. There's so much to do and see in Iceland. I wanted to do it all.
So I'm always vocalizing how I feel, literally narrating to the camera, almost as if it were a diary, honestly. I'm speaking in first person. I'm sharing the things that I'm thinking about or the things that I'm feeling in that moment. And oftentimes I don't use much of it or most of it, but it's great to capture those moments and use them for context and use them as a way to bring people into the experience themselves. My final point definitely has to do with audio, which is a often overlooked piece of the audiovisual package. I would go so far as to say that it is, 50% of the story that's being told here. I mean, we both talked about music quite a bit. Music is massive. Don't skip over that step. Take the time to really play with it, make it a part of your creative process. Find the right music, that fits and that elevates your work. So that's huge. But there's more than that. There's sound design. Sound design is massive. Sound design turns animations from cool visuals to something that's totally alive and that pulls you in. The good news is that if you capture a B-roll that doesn't have any audio with it or not very usable audio, which is often the case, it's not necessarily a huge deal. Obviously, it's good to capture as much good audio as possible when in the field, but so much sound design can be done in post. But there are libraries of sounds out there that you can pull and sneak into your edits, and nobody will ever know as long as you do it convincingly enough.